Oscar knows basketball. Oscar knows Kentucky fans are crazy. Oscar knows God is great.
Life is Good now moves down to the inside, and they're coming for the finish. It is Life is Good still in front. Life is Good is the winner.
Oscar knows life is good.
My name is Gary Falter with the Jockey Club. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's online panel. Now, today's panel will give you important insight on the relationship between trainers, jockeys, and jockeys' agents. Now, as the panel progresses, if you have any questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And at the end of the panel, we'll answer as many of your questions as time allows. The interconference series is hosted by the Jockey Club and the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association. I'd also like to recognize all of our sponsors, starting with the presenting sponsors, Bessemer Trust, Dean Dorton Equine, and Stoll Keenan Ogden. I'd also like to thank today's panel sponsor, WinStar Farm. Our sincere thanks to all the sponsors for their continued support of thoroughbred ownership. We hope you enjoyed today's panel, and we'll return next month when we have the final panel for 2022, and the subject is aftercare. Today's moderator is Millie Ball, host and reporter for XBTV and Santa Anita. She's also married to trainer Tim Yakteen. Thank you, Millie, for being with us today, and please take it from here.
Well, thank you very much, Gary. I'm very excited, actually, and honored to be asked to be the moderator here for this panel. It's the 6th of 7 in the series for 2022, as Gary mentioned. We'll be chatting about the relationship. This should really be fun, the relationship between trainers, jockeys, and their agents. Now, being married to a trainer, I've kind of seen both sides of it. I've seen the highs when the trainer's winning races, the jockey's moving everything right, the agent's obviously doing his job. But I've also seen the other side of it when things aren't going quite so well, things can get a little bit heated. So it should be a really fun conversation from both sides of the story here. Now, as owners, you entrust obviously your horses in these trainers to get them ready for the races, but you also leave them the responsibility of choosing the jockey, the right jockey for the horse. If you've got a horse that's a speed horse, maybe a sprinter, you want to get it out of the gate quickly, you might go to a jockey like Edwin Maldonado. He's a good gate rider. Or if you've got a horse that likes to come out of the gate and you need it to relax early because it's going to go 1.5 miles, you might use a jockey like Ramon Vasquez. We just saw that recently. John Sadler used Ramon Vasquez to win going 1.5 miles, just crediting him for his quiet hand. So there's a lot of reasons that go into how a trainer will choose the jockey and the role of the jockey's agent. So let's get started with our discussion and introduce our panelists. We have an agent, we have 2 trainers, and we have a trainer, we have 2 agents and 2 jockeys. And I'll start with Carolyn first, as ladies first. Carolyn, you are a former jockey agent. You're also president of Conley Bloodstock, and you were a TV personality as well, a lady of many hands. I also want to introduce Vince DeGregory. He is a jockey agent. Vince has probably been a jockey agent for as long as Queen Elizabeth reigned England. He's had 9 Hall of Fame jockeys, so I can't wait to hear his perspective. Tim Ham, our trainer, he trains back in the Midwest. He's won around 1,600 races, very successful. Hall of Famer jockey Chris McCarron, he needs little introduction, and Brice Blanc, jockey at Santa Anita. I saw him just yesterday working there. So great cast of panelists today. And since we are going to leave the responsibility mainly in the hands of the trainer to choose the jockey, I'm going to start with Tim Ham. So Tim, my first question goes out to you as a trainer. How often do you think like an agent will come to your barn and maybe convince you to use their jockey versus another jockey that maybe you've never used before?
We try to build relationships at each track with certain agents and certain riders. There's always a new young guy coming through, which we hope greet that with open arms. I like to get new people in the barn. They usually start out working some horses, seeing how their technique is working them, how they fit a certain horse. And we try to help that situation as much as we can.
Most owners don't get too involved in that. They leave the responsibility to you. From your perspective, just talk a little bit about the role of the jockey agent, Tim.
I think a good agent, they all want the best mounts as possible, but a lot of the agents build up their clients as trainers, and they try to stick loyal to them. I mean, they're an important part of it. At first, I had another business prior to the horses, and I didn't understand a jockey agent at all. They tend to come across as dishonest when you don't know the business, which I'll admit, when I first got into it, I didn't know the business. And, they'd say, I'll never forget the first horse I entered. I entered the horse, and I get a call from the racing office 2 hours later, you need a rider. I'm like, oh no, that's not the case. That's not, I got the call from this person, and they said it again. I said, no, you're mistaken. That's been taken care of. And I really had no idea how it really worked. But as you grow and you get more horses and you establish yourself and meet new people, the agent's a very integral part. And if they have a commitment that pops up after, they're an important part of you getting another good jockey that fits your horse. So, they're very integral in it. And they also help find races. If you got a lot of horses in your stable, they can be an aid to making sure you don't overlook a race if you're entering 3-4 tracks at once. So they're a big part of it.
You think, with the number of good jockeys there are at each track in your area, for example, in the Midwest, so many good jockeys. So how do you go about choosing the right jockey for your horse?
Well, I think you're making an assumption there that I'm at Keeneland all the time or Churchill. I race a lot of times at Thistledown and Belterra Park and Presque Isle Downs, which has a good jockey colony, but there's not, if you're at Belmont or Churchill or Saratoga, they're 10, 12, 15 deep. And like you say, there's really not a huge rush on one particular jockey, but at the smaller tracks, there really are a limited number of top jocks. So, we try to build a relationship with them the best we can and get one of the 3 or 4 that are always winning. And winning breeds winning. I don't care what you're doing. If you're a winner, you're a winner. You can go against the odds all you want, but when you look down, someone's winning at 20 to 24%, they're a winner. So, we try not to get out of that mold too much and ride winners.
And with a large stable that you have, do agents approach you on a daily basis, Tim, about using their jockey? And how does this process work from a trainer's perspective?
For the most part, at each track we're at, we have 1 or maybe 2 agents that get involved in helping us pick the riders. And they actually handle that for me. If I'll get people coming up, like I said, we'll try to help their young riders, but the main agent that we have at each track handles a lot of that for me.
And you think when you enter, do you ever enter into any agreements with a jockey agent that they're going to get first call on all your horses?
We don't enter a formal agreement. I mean, I think it's understood, for instance, at Presque Isle, Pablo Morales probably rides 85% of our horses. He don't want to ride them all, and we probably don't want him to ride them all. But at the same time, it's pretty well understood that if it's that he'll ride most of my horses. And if he can't, hey, I understand he may have a better mount. I don't know all the business out there he's got, and I don't want to cost a rider a good mount either. So we kind of work together, but at the same time, that's about as close to an agreement as we get.
You said, if jockeys, if they're winning, they're winning. If you're a trainer and you're winning races, you've got horses fit and ready, does it really matter what jockey you use at that point?
I think it does. I may not think it does to the point of some people do, but for instance, on the synthetic at Presque Isle, the riders that ride there consistently over the last 10 years, I believe, do have an edge over the riders that don't know the track as well. The synthetic or the turf at certain places, whether it's speed favoring, inside, outside, and they learn that during the periods of the meet and how the track's playing, and also how that particular surface plays. So, and there's some people that just have better clocks, better hands, they're better athletes. If LeBron James walks in this room I'm sitting in right now, hey, that guy can probably get it done. Likewise, if one of the Ortizes or Chris in his day, an athlete when you see it, they just get the job done a little better than the average.
Thank you so much, Tim. We're going to move on to our jockey agent panel now. We'll move on to Carolyn and Vincent. Carolyn, I would like to start with you. How many jockeys can an agent represent?
Well, it's been a few years now since I was actively working as a jockey agent, but at that point it was 2 jockeys. And Vince, has that changed since I left? I don't think it has.
No, the rules changed in the last 5 or 6 years, where jockey agent can have 2 older riders
And
or
one apprentice,
jockey and 1 older rider, but you can't have more than 2.
right?
And who works for who? Do you work for the jockey, or does the jockey work for you?
It's funny because if you ask me, my opinion was I always work for the jockey, but if you ask Vince, you'd get a totally different answer.
My
What do you
case,
think, Vin?
in my case, Millie, many years ago, when things finally turned out good for me and showed my ability to be able to pick live horses for the jockeys, I never called jockeys and asked them to fire their agent. And if they wanted me to be their agent, they had to call me. And most likely, Chris McCarron, my ex-champion, is on the line. And Chris called me to be his agent. And of course, we wound up leading the country 2 out of the 4 years. But in my case, Millie, I don't ask jockeys to fire their agents, but 95% of them, they go backstabbing their buddy and try to get that jockey that they're working for. And I'll tell you what happened to me, Millie, many years ago, when I was gung-ho and wanted to be a good agent. I went after this jockey, and finally he gave me his book. And the next day I found out his agent had 3 kids. And that just totally took me apart, and I started crying. I was bad that I took a job away from a guy with 3 kids, and I swore that I would never do that again. And
Well, there is a little bit of loyalty to you, Vince. A little bit of loyalty. We know that. Carolyn, how do you get paid? Is it the owners that pay you for your job?
No, so you make a percentage of what the jockey earns in the race. So the jockey gets a paycheck from the racetrack, and then the jockey has to write you a check for your percentage of his or her earnings. So hopefully that happens the same day. And usually it does. When I worked for Brees, it did.
And talk about how much you have to invest in the planning and strategy between you and your jockeys to get the best mounts possible.
An immense amount. And while a lot of it is collaboration, because like when I picked up Brees's business, he had particular horses that maybe he'd been working that he knew he really liked, or things like that. Whereas I might bring horses from a previous jockey to him and give him an opportunity on those horses. So we have to figure out what works. But more than that, there's a whole system of planning your approach that Vince taught me as my mentor. And he was an incredible mentor back when we had the draw in the racing office instead of over Zoom like they're doing it now. We would sit there for hours waiting for the draw, and Vince taught me so many strategies. And one of them is making a chart very similar to what they have in the racing office that maps out all of the races that have been run and at what distance they were run, and if they were boys or girls, fillies or colts, age groups, it's all broken down. So he taught me a system where I could go in and look up horses and figure out with the new condition book where they would likely be entered. And then you can get ahead of the game and go to a trainer and say, what about this horse in this race coming up in the book? And some would look annoyed, and some would look like, hey, you're on your game, you're paying attention. You asked me that question, and you try to find the live horse going in that race, and you try to get on that horse. So yeah, that's the strategy that Vince taught me.
Capitalizing on future mounts. Yeah, Vince, you probably have written the book on strategy for this. You have anything to add on some of your strategies for lining up the best mounts for your jockeys?
Well, in my days, of course, it's a lot different. Me having Chris McCarron and her working for Brees Blanc, I had owners and trainers come to me and drive me crazy. You got to ride this horse next time. And I already knew that I wasn't going to ride that horse, but sometimes you got to be a diplomat and say, well, I'll tell you what, if Chris is open, I'd be glad to ride that horse. But 90% of the time I was lying, because I'm going to try and stay open to get the favorite second choice. And And I never tried to, one thing I learned when I became an agent, Eddie Arquette was my mentor. He was my godfather and taught me one thing. And he said to me in Saratoga, when I got my license, he said, Vince, I'd like you to do me one thing. When you give a call to that trainer, make sure that you stay on that horse. You got to understand that trainer has an obligation to that owner, and that owner expects you to be riding his horse. He's paying the bills. And I said, okay, Pops, I will never, never turn any trainer around in my career. And to this day, when I had Pincay, Cordero, Shoemaker, you name them all, and I gave you a call and you didn't see me for a week, when you put that horse in, my jock would be riding your horse. And I've never turned any trainer around. And happy to say that at my age now, that I never will do that. Because I realize, Millie, you're married to a trainer and he has obligations to that owner. And sometimes when you put the horse in and that agent takes off, now what happens? Who does he get a chance to choose from? He gets the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, that most of the top jockeys are gone. Now he's in a bad position when that owner blames him that agent took off and caused the problem. So I feel badly about it. And I taught Millie, I taught so many young agents today, but some of them will listen and some of them think it's a big deal to take off to ride another horse. They'll take a horse that maybe is 5-1 to ride a 6-5 shot. And I guess from my years of experience, you take off the original horse that you had and you lose that stable and that horse would win. And now you lost both ways. So I've always believed that you got to think of the trainer and the owner as a jockey agent. When you give your word, they know that your jockey is going to ride their horse.
And on the flip side of that, is there often a situation where the trainer tells you you're riding my horse and then it comes to entry time and now you find your jockey's not on that horse? He's put somebody else on.
Yes. And that may happen very suddenly. You might get to the point where they're drawing the race and you have your rider on that particular horse and they draw the race and he's not on the horse. The trainer made a decision to put somebody else on and you would maybe turn down another mount or, but one thing I learned, and this was a skill that I've carried forward from being a jockey agent, is that if you get obsessed with that moment where someone did you wrong, where they put another rider on that horse without even bothering to tell you, let alone put another rider on that horse. If you get obsessed with that, you miss the next right move because there may be a horse that comes open and you want to be ready to get your rider on it. Or maybe the next race, someone's riding two and you make a phone call and get on that other horse. But if you stew for even a second at that draw over some of those things, you might miss that next right move.
So it sounds like the jockey agent role is part salesmanship, part negotiator. You got to be diplomatic, right? And juggling everything around. Is there anything else that I've missed?
Got to be a good handicapper, Millie. You must
read the condition book.
You should talk to your jockey. I always believe the jockey knows more than I do because on those horses, he knows who's sore, who's not as sore. Maybe he doesn't want to ride the horse I put him on. And therefore, you cause a little friction and you want to have a strong relationship, a jockey and an agent, and that you both work together for the benefit of us doing well, but to keep trainers and owners happy in the business. And you'll be more right than you'll be wrong if you work together as a team. If you try to do it individually, you say, my jock don't want to ride that horse. No, I don't get into that. I let him tell me sometimes. I'm very, very blessed between Cordero, Pincay, and Shoemaker and McCarran. Never come to me and say, I don't want to ride for that guy. I don't want to ride that horse. No, they handle it in a way they understand that I'm under a lot of pressure, that when that condition book comes out, I get hit with 50, 60 trainers within a period of one day. And you have to give your word and you want to make sure the jockey's happy what you did. So what I'll do a lot of time, say, Chris, so-and-so asked me to ride this horse. I didn't give him the call. I think this other horse is better. And maybe you might disagree with me down the road, but have confidence in me. I don't have enough time at the draw when a horse comes available to call him, say, Chris, do you want to ride this horse? No, he need to do the job. But if we work together, and I think in the long run, that everybody's going to be happy and he keeps winning. And the main thing is when a jock gets sour, gets on you, then nobody wins, because now the agent's afraid to put him on this horse for fear that he doesn't want to ride that horse. So, but I always believed in one thing: go through the jockey, talk to him, let him tell me if he wants to ride. And sometimes he says, I don't feel comfortable. I can tell you a story about Pinkay. Of course, in those days, I was getting 90% of the favorites. They come and sit in the box with me, and Lafitte never bothered me. And one night he called me. He said, Vince, that horse I rode today doesn't like me. I said, what? What do you mean the horse doesn't like you? He said, he just doesn't like me, and I can't get any run out of him. I said, you win all these races and you're telling me that horse doesn't like you. He said, believe me, let somebody else ride that horse. And sure as God, I refused to mount. The other jockey rode him, who was not as good as Lafitte, and he won. And I called Lafitte that night. I said, thank you for telling me. And now I believe you. At the beginning, I didn't believe it. But those are situations. Let McCarron tell you his side of the fact, because he's the great one. That's my buddy, CJ.
Well, thank you both. And we are going to hear from Chris McCarron momentarily. I just want to remind you folks, though, who are tuning in, owners and fans, just a reminder to be sure to submit your questions for your answers by your panelists using that Zoom Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So, Chris, your name's come up a lot. Hi, Chris. Just wanted to ask you first, along with Brees. A jockey's agent spends a lot of time, as you've heard from just now from Carolyn and Vinny, on the backside lining up these mounts for their riders. Give the audience some insight from a jockey's perspective, how that works. Are there disagreements between the two of you as to who you want to ride or not?
Yeah, well, thanks, Millie. It's my pleasure to be here with these familiar faces. Carolyn is my neighbor here in Lexington, Kentucky, and rode many years with Brees, and he was always a very, very professional jockey, very talented one. I've not had the pleasure of meeting Tim yet, but hopefully one of these days we will. And as far as Vince Gregory goes, if they ever establish a Hall of Fame for jockeys agents, Vince would be right at the top of the list. And the few years that we worked together, and I mean together, you asked the question about who works for whom. Well, I consider it a partnership. We work together. And yes, the percentage, I get the most of it, I get 75%, and Vince would, or the other agent, whoever was working for me, would get 25%. That's their standard fee that they collect from the jockey. And in the few years that Vince and I worked together, not one time did a trainer come to me and say, I can't use you anymore, Chris. Vince lied to me. Vince spun me. He said he was going to ride this horse, but you rode somebody else. That never happened with Vince. So he steadfastly stayed by the advice that the really brilliant Eddie Arcaro gave him many moons ago. And he just stayed by that. And I appreciate that greatly. So it has to be a collaboration. There are some agents out there who believe that the jockey works for him or her, but they're few and far between. They pretty much have a very domineering personality. And if the jockey is on the younger side, say still in the 20s or late teens, the agent really will pretty much command everything that's going on. They handle so much of the day-to-day stuff that the jockey doesn't have to worry about. But when I was riding in Maryland, my first 4 years that I was riding, I started when I was 18, and my agent at the time was in his 70s, and so he taught me a lot. But he also he wasn't the most honest person in the world. My business was so strong back then that my agent really wouldn't give anybody a call except for the big outfits like Buddy Delp, King Leatherberry, Dickie Dutrow, John Tamaro. All those guys were perennial leaders on the Maryland circuit, and those guys yes, he would give them a call, but anybody else, he would say, his name was Eddie Kinlaw. Eddie would say, you want me, go ahead and name me on. Just name me on. If I can ride them, I'll ride them. But back then, it wasn't real restrictive because you could be named on 3 horses in the body of the race, not including the also eligibles. And then the advanced daily racing form would come out, and Eddie would handicap, and he would just go ahead and name me on the horse that he thought was not going to have the best chance to win. Meanwhile, the other 2 people are searching for a rider. Well, the racing secretary back then, in the mid to maybe in the late 70s, he established a rule, and they call it the Kinlaw rule. You cannot be named on more than 1 horse in the body of the race. You could be named on 1 in the body of the race and 1 on the also eligibles. Oh, another thing back then, when I had the bug, a trainer could enter a horse and claim the apprentice weight allowance and not actually name a rider. So there'd be 4 or 5 horses named in the race or entered in the race, and there'd be no jockey named on, but the 5-pound or 10-pound weight allowance would be claimed. And then, so my agent would then, again, like I said, handicap and select who he thought was the best one for me to ride. And he got away with that for quite a while. And then I moved west to Santa Anita, Hollywood Park, and Del Mar. And it was a whole new kettle of fish for me, because when I was riding in Maryland, I didn't really have to work all that hard in the mornings. I would only breeze 1 or 2 horses in the morning when I was riding at Bowie, Laurel, and Pimlico. But when I got out to Santa Anita, I was there with about 2 weeks left in the race meeting back in 1978, and then we moved to Hollywood Park. Well, my agent at the time, he goes by Harry the Hat. His name was Harry Hassick, a really good agent, a top agent. He had me breezing 6, 7, 8, 9 horses every morning, and I'm riding 7 or 8 in the afternoon. I tell you what, and we did great. We finished 4th in my first full meet at Hollywood Park, behind none other than Lafitte Pinkai, Sandy Hawley, and Bill Shoemaker. And Darryl McCard was right there too. And so when we moved down to Del Mar, everyone's telling me, "Oh, Chris, you had such a great start to riding out here against these heavy heads that you'll probably be leading rider at Del Mar." Well, we kind of slipped a little bit and finished 6th down there. But anyway, the agent's job is very, very crucial. The agent has to be sharp, has to get up every morning, show up at the barns, deal with the trainers, and quite often with the owners, but that would be mostly in the afternoons when their owners are out there at the races and the agents are hanging around the box seats up there. But going back to what I said earlier, it's a collaboration. If I'm breezing that many horses in the morning, I'm going to keep tabs on the ones that impress me the most. And I'm definitely going to tell my agent right away that we got to ride this one. Don't let this one slip through your hands. And then there, on the other side of the coin, there'd be horses that I didn't want to ride because I didn't like the way they traveled. I didn't like the way they behaved. They weren't my cup of tea, so to speak. And then you got a guy like Lafitte Pinkai Jr., who would ride anything with hair on it. But anyway, I've kind of gone on here, so thanks.
No, that's great information. And I want to add to that and ask Brees. Brees, you are out there in the mornings and you do work a lot of horses for various trainers. Do you find that helps you? And are there particular trainers that you would hope your agent would ride for because you prefer to ride for those trainers?
Yeah, definitely. I think over the years, I was able to build a connection with a lot of trainers that way on specific horses that were a little more on the difficult side. I think from the start, when I came here, I was able to have, I guess, the opportunity to be able to settle and relax horses a lot, and I think that helped me a lot in my career throughout. And so I was able to get a lot of those type of horses that needed a little extra help, fillies that were very nervous, horses that were a little difficult, nervous, and such. And I really got that opportunity to help them throughout the career, and just kind of give them a chance to get better, improve throughout, and kind of was a really good option for me. And I picked up a lot of nice horses that other people didn't get because they were difficult. And I've done really well with them, and was able to keep them a pretty long period of time and try to keep them for most of their career, which helped me a lot.
Bruce, it seems like it's become quite fashionable, at least here on the West Coast, with European riders coming over. We've seen, you, Flavien Prat, more recently, Rispoli. We've got quite a few European riders that are making their base here in Southern California. Do you think that they also offer those advantages of skillmanship, perhaps, having learned how to ride on the turf so well over in Europe and bringing that here?
Well, the thing, Millie, that I think, obviously you being European, and Chris would understand because he tried to do the schooling in Kentucky. And I think the plus that we have in Europe is we all start in the school, which is type of a trading school. And not only you just come and just get on a horse and think, oh, you're going to be a jockey, but you have to really work throughout the years of an apprenticeship with a trainer, and you learn skills and have to groom your horse. You have to take care of your horse. You have to learn every little bit of horsemanship that comes with it before you become a jockey. So I think a lot of the Europeans have that extra plus in their back pocket, being very good horsemen before they start riding. So I think I was probably one of the first European to stay on the West Coast. There was a couple of other riders French jockeys, I would say, or Europeans that were on the East Coast when I first came. But on the West Coast, I was pretty much the first one that stayed. A lot of guys used to come and spend the winter and then went back to Europe and for the season. It was like kind of a little bit of a test and a challenge for me, because a lot of people here didn't ride European riders that much. And, everybody looked at the European riders like the English style riding, and it was not very pretty. And, the French style is a little different as well. So, but the thing I like to kind of cut into, and that is, Steve Asmussen, Cash Asmussen, Cash and Steve Cotton brought the American style of riding, I should say, to the European racing style. And that was a huge plus for me as a young apprentice, because it taught me I kind of seen myself a lot more into that style of riding because of my size. I was told a rider. Cash was always struggled with his weight. He was tall jockey. He was very thin, lean, long arms. And so I really took to his style of riding. I watched him a lot. He rode quite a bit for my boss that I had my apprenticeship for. So it was, I think a lot of the Europeans that are coming now it was a plus because of Cash and Steve Cotton come into Europe and taking over the riding style of a lot of those European countries. So I think it's kind of a plus when now a lot of the Europeans are coming here, can assess and being able to adapt to the style of racing, especially in California, that's very fast and very quick.
Bruce, you mentioned Cash. I was lucky enough to work for Cash as well when I was with John Hammond over in France. But would he have had an agent in France? Do French jockeys have agents in the same way that we do here in America?
No.
Early on, it was not. There was no agents. So I think Cash was very sharp, and he was probably his own agent, making phone calls and telling owners, having that experience from dealing with agents here in the US at that time. But now there is agents. It's a little different, I think, than we do it here in the US. I think an agent is allowed to have multiple jockeys and multiple top jockeys. So I'm not exactly sure how the system works nowadays because I haven't been in Europe in a very long time, but I think it is very common for an agent to have multiple jockeys.
Chris, I wanted to ask you, I read kind of sad, I thought, news of Doug Bradar losing Florent Giroux after 12 years of their partnership together as a jockey and jockey agent. Does that happen often, that a jockey will fire an agent because they're in a slump, just things aren't going well? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I certainly don't know the circumstances under which Florent made the decision to move on and change agents, but yeah, it does happen. You know, it's kind of like a marriage. You know, you spend a lot of time together, and you really have to get along well. And sometimes, as you mentioned, like a slump, there'll be bumps in the road, and it depends on how solid, how tight your relationship is with, as far as the rider is concerned, how solid and tight your relationship is with your agent. You know, some agents, they want to handle absolutely every aspect of a jockey's career and sometimes their life. Other agents, all they want to do is just handle the acquiring of good mounts. It all depends on their personality. With me, it was you know, whether it was Vance or Scotty McClellan, who worked for me for a long time, 21 years. You know, I just wanted them to handle my acquiring of mounts. When it comes to travel, I always had my agent ask me if I want to go somewhere to ride a horse. I always took care of my own booking of my travel plans, because I was very particular about whether I was going to fly nonstop somewhere or I had to change planes, or I always whether I was going to take off the day before, like on a Friday, instead of flying on the red eye. Most of the time I would take the red eye. I'd ride out west on Friday and then somewhere else in the country on Saturday, and then fly right back Saturday night. I did that for many, many years. And then there are agents out there who handle all the travel business for the jockey, and that's because that's the way the jockey wants it. But you know, as I said, the most important thing to keep a relationship together is know that you're collaborating with each other, and there's got to be a certain level of respect for each other and appreciation for each other, and you have to be able to make some compromises along the way, just like when you're in a marriage. You know, it's a relationship. A sound relationship is based on understanding, and a great deal of it is compromise.
I wanted just to let Vince and Carolyn chime in a little bit on that conversation there, Chris. You know, we've just recently, for example, saw Flavien Prat. He left Southern California, where he was doing really well, Carolyn, and moved back to New York. Well, he moved out to New York, and his agent had to make the decision, to go with him or stay. And he went to do the business there. So I would imagine that could cause, conversation in maybe splitting partnerships or not. How do you feel about whether, if your jockey's in a slump, that you move on?
Well, everyone has their ups and downs, and I think you find a way to roll with those because it's like waves, that it just naturally goes like that. But I have to say, with Brees, one thing I enjoyed so much was he had this knack for attracting really good horses. Like if there was a stakes race coming up, he was on people's radar, especially a grass race. And he can win on the dirt too, as he proved many, many, many times. But yeah. And, sometimes there's things outside of people's control that impacts the outcome. I mean, more often than not. So what might be perceived as some kind of slump may just be factors that you're not able to control. And everyone has a family too, and has to make decisions accordingly. So, but when Brees and I were together, it was so much fun because I could sit and watch him ride a race and enjoy every second of it, because he would never lose momentum. He'd come from the back of the pack in a turf race, and you just never see him get stopped. He had this flow about him. And then we got to relive the race after we could walk back and talk through everything that happened. And as a horse lover and someone who loves racing, that was just a treat, even after workouts in the morning. So I absolutely loved working with Brees. We had so much fun, and he's a marvelous cook.
Thank you.
French food.
I really enjoy working with you too. It was a lot of fun, and it's like Chris was saying, it's having the right connection with someone. It's very important, I think. Working together is very important, I think, myself. If you don't see eye to eye, I don't think you can do very good work as a jockey with an agent.
Tim, I wanted to bring you into this conversation too. I thought Carolyn brought up a very good point about, watching the jockey ride the race, and then you come back and you discuss it. How much discussion do you like to have with your jockey after a race, and then bring in the agent and say, okay, he made a mistake, or he did a great job, but we weren't quite ready to win today. Let's book you in on this next mount, on this horse the next time he runs.
As far as the race goes, I normally contact the agent right after if I see something that particular horse, if she had trouble in the race or something that horse likes that didn't happen. And they have a great, obviously communication with their rider. I let them kind of discuss those things. Then usually the next day in the morning, we'll discuss that afternoon's races and what happened previously. But I normally go to the agent first. I don't want to, a lot of these things are happening in a split second. And if something happens, I want them to be able to talk freely and get their perception on it back too, just, instead of any pressure. So I usually go through the agent most of the time on that.
And do you find you do it more with the apprentices and, jockeys that are just getting their legs underneath them?
Some more, probably more often, but, things happen in every race. And a lot of times I'll just want to know, if it was just the circumstance or was something they wanted to have happen, what was their take on it, just so we can plan going forward.
And would you listen to a jockey if they said, I really think this horse needs to go longer, or I really think this horse needs blinkers, would benefit from that? Is that a conversation that you would have immediately after the race, perhaps with a rider?
Yeah, absolutely. When a rider hops off every time, it's a real quick conversation. What do you think? And they'll give you that kind of feedback maybe momentarily. And then we certainly put that in the mix. It's like anything else you do in life. You take all the information you get and you kind of evaluate it, and then you got the final call. But it's certainly great information, and most of the time we take it. They're on the horse, and most of them are experienced guys, and we're paying them to do a job because we trusted them. So we're going to take their advice in a lot of cases.
But Vince, going back to you, when you're looking, maybe, your rider's retired and you're looking for a new spot to fill, what are some of the attributes you look in as a jockey and you think, if I took this jockey on, I think I could, really move him up the ladder? What are some of those attributes that you like to look for in a jockey?
Well, first of all, I'd like for me to believe in his talent, that he has the ability, and I have to ask him, can you handle direction? And sometimes they say direction. I say, yeah, can you handle me getting on your ass and telling you made a mistake and you did this wrong? Because I'm an up-tempo guy, and working for Chris McCarron, going way back with him. Chris wasn't, he told you the truth. When I took his book, I had a jockey named Marco Castaneda, and Chris was having a tough time, and he fell at the top of the stretch in the morning at Santa Anita, and I ran over and grabbed that horse right away, was thrashing him, and finally Chris got up and he said to me, is there any chance you could be my agent? And it's like yesterday, I remember, and it's way back in 1978. I knew the ability that he had, because his friend was Chick Lang, and Chick was my buddy, and Chick used to brag about him all the time. Vince, you got to take this job. I said, he's in Maryland. I worked in Maryland for a long time, Bowie, Pimlico, and I put my time in. So when I told Chris, I said, Chris, I knew in my heart I wanted to be his agent, but I said, I don't fire jockeys. I said, I got a jock that's winning races, but he's gotten to the point he likes to go out drinking and partying and not take care of business in the mornings. I said, I'll tell you what, Chris, I'll spend a week with him, tell him up front. If he straightens up, then I'll stay with him. But in my heart, I wanted to go to work for Chris. And as it went, Marco started drinking, didn't show up. So that's how we became a team. And of all the jocks that I've had of the champions, when he worked the 2-year-old, in fact, we're lucky at the time I took his book. Elliot Birch was here in California from New York, and I knew Elliot well. And I went to Elliot. I said, I got this young jock, Chris McCarron. I'd like to buy some horses for you. And he said, bring him by the barn. Let him get on a couple of 2-year-olds for me. So, of course, Chris worked him. And right away, when Chris worked one that he liked, he said, I really like this colt. So he more or less led me into getting those 2-year-olds to ride for Elliot Birch. And pretty soon, everything we're riding that he liked, boom, they kept winning. I said, wow. I had Cordero and Pincay, they never were that sharp. But being with Chris, he would tell me something and I listened. The antenna went up every time he told me about a horse. And that's how we got together. And I'll never forget, we got to winning races. My ex-jockey was Daryl McHarg, and Scotty McClellan had his book. And I was after Daryl because I made him leading rider, second leading rider, and I got fired. Went through a divorce with my wife, and he fired me. So I had a vendetta against Daryl McHarg. And I told Chris, and every day Chris was winning, and McHarg would come out in the morning to work horses, and he had those rabbit ears. I said, you keep looking up, the redhead's on your ass. And he would look around, and he would, I knew I had him. And Chris kept winning. And finally we got into Hollywood Park. We got all the good horses to ride. And he said to me, we're going to go to go to New York. I said, we can't go to New York because we don't have enough money and enough winners to hook in with Cordero. And it's going to be tough.
Hey, Vince.
Yeah.
Let me jump in right here. I'm going to tell the story that you're about to tell, if you don't mind. Okay, so Millie, Carolyn, Reese, Tim, this is how forward thinking, how prescient Vince DeGregory is. So we're working together in 1980. I led the meet at Santa Anita, led the meet at Hollywood Park. Now I'm leading rider at Del Mar. We get about halfway through the meet at Del Mar, like middle of August, and Vince says to me, hey, Chris, if we have a $500,000 lead on Cordero when Del Mar closes, he said, we're going to have to go to New York for the rest of the year. I said, why is that? He goes, well, the only way we can beat him for the money title is to ride day and night. And that's what he's going to do. He's going to ride Belmont or Aqueduct in the afternoon and then drive over to Meadowlands and ride another meet over there. So Del Mar closed. I was a little bit more than just a little over 500,000 in front. And the day after Del Mar closed on a Wednesday, I was named on 4 horses the following day, Thursday at Belmont Park. One of them was for Laz Barrera. And I was on a Northern Dancer colt for Laz. And I won an allowance race on the grass at Belmont. And when I hit this colt left-handed, he ducked out and bothered somebody, and they took me down. And fortunately, they didn't give me days because I hit the colt once and he ducked. and I straightened them up right away. It wasn't my fault. So, but Vince was still in Los Angeles. We're talking on the phone, and oh no, he was there. He was in New York, and Vince says, "You know what? God damn it! If we get days for this," he said, "we're just going to have to pack up and go home." I said, "Well, listen, I'm going to do my best in the movies the next day," and I got to where I was pretty adept with analyzing a race, breaking it down, and explaining my heartfelt thoughts to the stewards and what happened. And so they exonerated me. They didn't give me days. And so long story short, we ended up being leading rider at Aqueduct and the Meadowlands. I was averaging 15, 16 races a day. I'd ride 8 at Aqueduct and eight that night at Meadowlands.
Yeah.
And hate every minute of it. No, just kidding.
That's what kept you young, Chris.
I would get back to my hotel. The last race would run at Meadowlands at 11 o'clock. And I get back to my hotel around midnight. I was staying in the Hilton right there at JFK. I was there for 3.5 months. And Vince's projection, what he was thinking ahead of time, came to fruition. And Vince, I'll always thank you for that.
That's an awesome story. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for sharing that. That concludes our panel discussion. We're about to take a little bit of a break, move into that Q&A, question and answer period. So while we sort through all your questions you submitted, please enjoy the following from our sponsor, the Blood Horse.
Blood Horse Plus, available through bloodhorse.com, provides exclusive, timely, and unmatched content to subscribers, including Fox Sports, Blood Horse branded weekly programs, a detailed stakes winners section, behind-the-scenes videos from Blood Horse staff, on-demand access to deeper horse statistics, and a $5 monthly credit to equineline.com. Upgrade to Blood Horse Plus today.
Okay. All right. Great discussion. Let's get into some questions. Okay. First question. This would be for the two jockeys agents. So is it a conflict to have more than one jockey as a jockey agent? How do you balance that out when you have two jockeys that you're working for?
To be honest with you, Gary, when I had the top jockeys, and I more or less wanted to concentrate on them and let them know that I'm not going to take an apprentice jockey, which might take him off some horses. And I always felt comfortable protecting my jock and put all my, how can I say, my time into him and try to protect him. Because a lot of times when you get into a losing streak, right away, the owners or the trainers decide they want to make a change. And I tried not to let that happen. You always try to protect your rider. But today it's a lot easier, because today the agents don't have to be there at the draw, Gary, in the mornings. You have an 800 number, you call, and you listen to the draw in the racing office. And you know, some of those agents don't even go to the races in the morning back east. They do all the business on the phone. And I don't like that. I like to be there with the rider. And when he gets off work a horse, sometimes you say, that horse can't run too good. But if you got two riders, you're spending time with that other rider and taking it away from your older rider, who's making you the money, and he's the one that's going to win all the money for you, because he's going to ride in the stake races. The apprentice jockeys usually don't get that opportunity. So in my situation, Gary, I always was happy when I had Cordero or with Pinkay or McCarran or Shoemaker. I never would take any other apprentice jockey. In fact, I turned down Pat Valenzuela when he came from New Mexico. Milo Valenzuela was his uncle, and he was my friend. He said, "Vince, you got to take him." I said, "I can't take him. I got my own rider to protect." So to answer your question, Gary, I always felt comfortable trying to protect my main guy who was making the money, and he was the one in demand. And of course, I'd like to help younger riders. I've done work for other times. I've worked for apprentice jockeys, and I had Daryl McCarg. I had Aaron Greider. He wound up the leading rider at Hollywood Park. But it's very hard to try to keep two of them happy. And when you got the main guy in demand throughout the country riding $500,000 races, you better protect him, his business, and stop worrying about if you're going to make 30 or 40,000 with an apprentice jockey. So I always tried to, Gary, protect my older rider, and I felt more comfortable working with them. And
Vince, it was different for me. It was different for me in California.
I'd like to say congratulations to Brice Blanc, who now decided to retire and he's going to be a steward. And I think he's going to be a fabulous steward. And I wish him nothing but the best. And you were great. I worked for Brice too, a class act. And I know he's going to be a class steward. And I wish you all the best, Brice.
Thank you, Vince. I appreciate it.
And when I had Brice, Vince, I had Octavio Vergara Jr., who would ride down at Los Alamitos at night. So that worked out great. They were attracting different kinds of horses. And that was a beautiful balance because the cost of living in LA has not gone down any, these past years. So sometimes it can be very fruitful to have more than one rider, especially if they attract a different kind of horse. That's key.
If you don't have a leading rider, I think it's okay to work for two riders because then you need that extra money. When you've got the leading riders, money comes in very, very fast. But when you don't have that rider, Carolyn, the paychecks get very, very small. And you try to work for two riders to accommodate your expenses. But I never got into that situation, all because I was very, very blessed in the long run to have talented riders come to me and made my job a lot easier.
Okay. Next question. Do all jockeys have an agent? And if not, how do those jockeys arrange to get mounts if they don't have an agent?
Let you answer that.
That's a good question for Brice because Brice has not had an agent and been successful both ways.
Okay. How do you get mounts, Brice, when you don't have an agent?
Well, you just do what your agent's supposed to do. And pretty much, I've got to say that over the years, you build connections with trainers and owners. So that you have an agent or not, these connections usually come for you. Then the more busy you are, the more of an agent you need because you want to make sure the business is handled. And it's not easy to handle everything by yourself if you have a lot of business. But the later years of my career, I didn't have a ton of business. So it was fairly easy for me to handle it myself. And, it's not that hard to manage, especially when you have good connections with people and people you trust, trainers and owners that, are very loyal. So it's a lot of work. Obviously it's double duty. It's double duty to do that job, but I've really enjoyed both sides. I enjoy being the agent and I enjoy being the jockey as well. And it's kind of nice to see how much work your agent actually does for you and by experiencing it firsthand. So it's doable. It's just a lot of work. And the more business you have, the harder it is to do.
Okay. Question for the two jockeys concerning maintaining your weight. Do jockeys typically have a nutritionist to help them maintain their weight?
Actually, it doesn't happen too often. There are some jockeys that are very in tune with their bodies and they, work out. Mike Smith is very well known for hitting gym. He's a gym rat, and Victor Espinoza is the same. Lafitte has been a gym rat for a long, long time. He still goes to the gym today. But for the most part, they pretty much handle it themselves. They have they're different ways of looking at nutrition. Some riders are small enough where they can eat just about whatever they want, but the riders that have difficulty maintaining their weight, they do have to be careful with the amount of calories they're going to consume on a typical day. Lafitte is famously known for subsisting on 800 calories a day. How he did it is just phenomenal. I believe that he's one of the greatest athletes of any sport ever. And but there are a lot of jockeys today, more and more it's happening that they're going to the gym and they're not going there to build muscle. They're going there to stay keep their body tuned, keep their body lean. And as far as nutritionists go, I really don't know of any today that do that. Years ago, there was a little bit of a trend that Lafitte kind of started. Get your blood tested to see if you have any food allergies, and he was he kind of led the way as far as the nutrition goes. And but today I don't really know of any that seek the counsel of a nutritionist.
I think there's a couple of guys in Europe that do that. I think Pellier was one of them. Olivier did. I had a nutritionist and did. I think like Chris was talking about getting a blood test for allergies and such, and to get a better understanding of the nutrition as well. Personally, I'm just like Chris. I've never had one. I always was very cautious with what I eat. Being French is a little hard because I love food, and I love to cook as well. So, but I think the key is mainly staying fit and staying away from certain things. I've always had kind of a way of eating once a day. I don't like to ride with a full stomach anyway. So my big thing was to have dinner at night. Many people do things differently, but for me, for my whole career, that's what I did. I just didn't eat during the day, and I eat at night in the evening and cook a nice dinner, and that was my treat for the day. But I've always eaten a lot of fish on days that I knew 2-3 days ahead. When you had light weights, you just be a little more cautious 3 days out, pretty much.
Can I jump in this situation?
Sure,
The agent working for Jockeys, I listened to so many owners and trainers complain years and years ago about 1 pound over, and you never heard the end of it. And today, I listened yesterday to some of the riders riding at Santa Anita. The horse got 120 pounds and the jockey's 1 pound over. I said, what? 121? In our days, if you did 115, you were lucky you got any mounts. You went to New York, 1 pound, they wouldn't put you on. So today the jockeys got it much easier, Brees. They can eat a lot more, and no owners or trainer are complaining to the agent, oh, your jock, I can't put him on. He's 3 pounds over. We don't have that problem anymore. Thank God that they should elevate between you and I. I'm not a jockey, but I understood what you guys went through, and you had to watch your weight at all times, and it felt bad about it. And I can tell you one other story. I'm in New York with Lafitte, and I never had dinner with Lafitte, knowing his situation. And one day he said to me, why can't we have dinner? And we stayed in the same hotel. I stayed there with Chris as well. I said, okay. So he ordered his food and I ordered mine. And when the food came, 3/4 of it was mine. He had one little piece of fish and a tomato. And I said, oh my God, look what he's going through for me to make a living. I said to the waitress, give me the check, I'm leaving. He said, where are you going? I said, I can't eat with you, Lafitte. I'm embarrassed that I can eat anything I want, and you're killing yourself for us to make a living. And that's how much respect I've had working for Jockeys. I know what you guys go through. Nobody cares about what you go through. They want you to ride a horse and do the weight. And today it's a lot easier for all the jockeys. They can do 19 or 20, nobody complains. Chris, you'd have a ball today. You would too, Brees. But today the game has changed, and I'm happy about it, that they finally gave in to let the jocks. They're getting bigger every day when they're born. They're not being born small anymore. So owners, hopefully, will take in consideration for the jockey. If he's 1 pound over sometime, it might happen. He probably had dinner and didn't have a chance to go into the hot box, which I hate the hot box. I didn't want to hear that, for a jockey to get in there and lose 2 pounds and get on that horse and be weak, and sometimes can't be efficient in the drive. And knowing that he went to the hot box, that's why he got beat. But you got to protect your rider as an agent. You're going to hear the knocks all the time. But today it's great for a jockey. Trainers and owners don't complain anymore.
Okay, thanks, Vince. Good input. Okay, question about mounts. Is it more important to get a jockey as many mounts as possible? This is from an agent's perspective, or only get the mounts on favorite horses?
Well, you got to look at it as an agent. You got to have feelings for that jock that you work for. And some of them can handle riding 8 a day. And like Chris said, when he got to winning with me, I eventually started saying, hey, Chris, I'm not going to let you work as many horses because it's causing a problem. You're working horses that you're not even going to ride, that I'm going to have calls with somebody else for those races. So I tried to get them to back off and maybe work 3 or 4 at the max in the morning and try to evaluate how important it is for him to ride 8 horses. But if you got him on live horses, they don't mind it, Gary. Chris can talk to you better and Brees can as well. But me not being the jockey, and yeah, I want him to ride 8 because I want him to be leading rider. And I was emphatic about that. Of course, Chris always said, you're a control freak. And that's the way I was. I wanted him to be the star. I wanted him to shine. And I took it to heart. And yes, Gary, I tried to be conscientious of the fact not to burn him out riding 8 in the morning working and riding 8 in the afternoon. And most of the time they never complain. That's the other aspect of it. Chris never complained to me about it, neither did Cordero or Pinkay. And eventually with Lafitte, the same situation. Him pulling weight, he wanted to work horses in the morning, but it started causing a problem. So I backed off on him. I said, no, you stay home. He said, well, I got to work. Go to the gym. You're not going to stand here in the morning and work 8 horses and then go to ride 8 in the afternoon. So in to answering your question, Gary, it depends upon the agent and the jockey, how they work with each other. And I always wanted to be strong with my rider. He is my man and I'm his guy. And that's the way I worked as an agent.
Okay, Carolyn, anything you can add to that?
I think Vince said it all, but some riders like to be busy and others would like to be more selective. It really is a preference of the rider.
Okay.
True.
Okay, a couple more questions. So not all races come from the condition book. Many extras are added daily. So how do trainers and agents stay on top of these extra races and races that get hung up the day that the races are drawn? How do you stay on top of that?
Well, in my situation, Gary, many, many years ago, Kenny Noah and I was working in Garden State, took a liking to me and he said, Vince, I think you got a chance to be an outstanding agent. I'd like to learn a condition book to the point where you know where most of the horses are going to run and you point for them horses in the next condition book. So he taught me how to keep records of individual horses. I do that today. When the overnight comes out, I go to each race individually. I go to 2-year-old fillies, 2-year-old colts. I put those races in, the distance, turf or dirt, how many was in it. So I have a general idea how far apart those races are going to be run. So when you're working some horses, like to say, Chris, hey, this horse can really run. And maybe he put the horse in, didn't get in. And now you want that horse to run him right back quick. But you have an idea of keeping those records. And Carolyn knows, and all the agents come to me. What do you think about the book? There's going to be a lot of lean days. They say, how many? I got a call in this race. How many do you think will go? And I would pull up my book and I say, you might be in trouble. They went with 6 the last time out. So as an agent, you want to know where the horses are going to run, and you want to know how good they are or how bad they are. But you don't know about first-time starters. That all takes place with the jockey you're working for him to give you an idea on the horses he's working. He knows better than me. You listen to a trainer, and all trainers like their horses. That's just Mother Nature. And sometimes you listen to a trainer, and he'll confuse you, and you'll take his word over the jock who liked this horse. And so when they come up, the jock say, I told you about that horse. Come here. Well, that trainer really liked that horse. He's putting you on a lot of winners. I gave him the call. But sometimes you got to be a shrink to the point you want to protect your rider, and you want to listen what he wants, and you try to listen to trainers that you're riding for. So I feel that today. I have a general idea who's going to run, where they're going to run. And I can go to trainers a lot of times and say, that race didn't go for 6 weeks. You might be in trouble in the next book. So don't be too rough on him, get him primed. And next thing he's extra fresh and the races don't come up. And then the poor trainer's got a headache. And I don't know, Tim, you know better than me. I'm not a trainer. And I'm sure you go through that same situation, that you get your horse ready and the races don't go. So a good agent's got to know where them horses run and be open to ride them horses. And when you're working for like Chris, I mean, he made it a lot easier for me because he had a great opinion on 2-year-olds. Wow. And all he did, win, 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 win. So it makes it a lot easier. But when you got to the point that you work all these horses and the races don't come up, you get all upset because you know your jock is sitting on a winner and you're not sitting on them 20-1 shots. So you have to pay attention in the condition book. And Carolyn, you can tell him I helped you with Brees and decide a lot of races weren't going to go and try to concentrate on other races.
That's right. And you get a feel when the book comes out what's missing. If you're doing your homework, you know what's not in there, and you'll get an idea of what trainers are going to start coming in the racing office and sitting down with the racing secretary and asking for, because they aren't in the book. And then every day when the overnight comes out, you know, you enter those races in your chart, and then you look at what the extras are and you just start paying attention. So, and that those extras go everywhere with you. I did everything on an iPad. So I had all my overnights and racing form and condition book and everything in my iPad. And so I'd have those extras right there and I could check them out at any time. But most agents, you'll see it. I mean, maybe not as much now, but with the condition book and then the folded overnights in the condition book. And those were in there for a number of reasons, but primarily for those extras. So
to answer your question, Gary, a lot of times a racing secretary will put up an extra and it's not going to go, but he's doing it to appease the trainer. Trainer says, oh, would you do me a favor, put this extra up? I got it. My owner wants to make sure I get that horse in. So he puts it up, knows it's not going to go, but that's why you'll see a lot of extras every day on the overnight.
Okay, good insight. Okay, last question, and then I'm going to drop off. And Millie, if you can wrap things up after this last question. So, do agents get bonuses for big wins?
Yes, in my situation, I can proudly say, Chris was on the phone. I had him the second year, and Seagram's was giving out $15,000 for the leading money jockey in 1 year. And I went to Chris. I said, Chris, if I make you leading rider, can I get that $15,000 bonus? And sure as God, he wound up the leading rider. And they presented the check to him at Santa Anita, I think it was in April of the next year. And he signed the check over to me for $15,000.
well done, Chris. And Brees and I would win.
He deserved every penny of it.
Brees and I would win a few steaks, and then he and Jill would cook coca vin and have wine, and we'd celebrate at their house. So that was our plus.
That's great, Carolyn.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah.
Very good times.
Well, I want to step in and just thank all of you panelists, and Carolyn, Chris, Vince, Brees, Tim. Thank you so much for all that insight. I learned a lot. I thought I knew quite a bit of it, but I learned a lot. And you guys are all very experienced in your field. So we really appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat and answer a lot of those questions. We want to thank our panel sponsors as well, Windstar Farm. Thank you very much. But most important, I think our panelists will agree, thank you to all of you owners, because your investment, without that, we would not only not have an industry, but we wouldn't have a product. So we greatly appreciate you investing in horse racing. We hope you're enjoying it and hope you learned something from our wonderful panelists this afternoon, discussing that relationship between jockeys, jockey agents, and their trainers. So we'll be back next month with the final panel in 2022. Gary mentioned that it will be about aftercare. So until then, stay well and visit the Winner's Circle often.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
God
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.